Zubaida was a kind-hearted and soft-spoken teacher from Kisumu, Kenya. She had always dreamed of a simple, peaceful life filled with love, honesty, and family. When she met Jabari, a charming and successful man from a well-off family, it felt like everything was finally falling into place. Their love story was beautiful, and soon they got married in a joyful ceremony surrounded by laughter, music, and blessings. Zubaida entered her new home with hope in her heart and a smile on her face. She was ready to be a good wife, a caring daughter-in-law, and a part of a new family. At first, everything seemed perfect. Mama Chipo, Jabari's mother, welcomed her warmly. She would call Zubaida my daughter, and often ask her to sit with her during tea time. The house was big and full of life, and Zubaida tried her best to fit in, always helping around, teaching local kids after school, and treating everyone with respect. She truly believed she had found a second home. But slowly, things began to change. Mama Chipo's friendly smile started to fade. Her eyes, once warm, now carried a strange coldness. She would make little comments about how Zubaida cleaned, how she cooked, or even how she dressed. Sometimes she would stare at her without saying a word, just watching. Zubaida didn't understand what had changed. She tried harder, stayed quiet, and remained respectful, hoping it was just a passing mood. But deep inside, a quiet fear began to grow. Something wasn't right. It started on an ordinary afternoon. The family had just finished lunch, and everyone was gathered in the living room, chatting and sipping tea. Mama Chipo suddenly stood up, holding her jewelry box in her hand, her face tense. "My gold earrings are missing," she said loudly, looking around the room. The conversation stopped. Everyone turned to her, confused. "They were right here," she continued, opening and closing drawers as she spoke. "I wore them just 2 days ago. Now they're gone." Her voice was sharper now, filled with frustration and something else, suspicion. Zubaida looked up from her seat, a little puzzled, but not alarmed. She assumed it was a misunderstanding. Maybe Mama Chipo had misplaced them. But then, the old woman's eyes slowly turned to her. "You were the last one in my room, weren't you, Zubaida?" she said, her tone calm but cold. The words hit like ice. The room went dead silent. Zubaida blinked, confused and hurt. "I was just helping you fold your scarves," she replied softly, her voice trembling. Her heart pounded. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. Was Mama Chipo really suggesting? She looked at her husband, Jabari, hoping he would speak up, that he would laugh it off and say, "Come on, Mum, that's ridiculous." But he didn't. He stayed quiet, eyes glued to the floor. That silence screamed louder than words. Zubaida felt her throat tighten. The people around her, her in-laws, cousins, aunties, all started exchanging quiet glances. No one said anything. No one stood up for her. She was alone, surrounded by family, yet somehow completely isolated. She didn't cry. She didn't shout. She just sat there, frozen in disbelief. Her cheeks burned with shame, though she had done nothing wrong. In her heart, she knew this moment had changed everything. It wasn't just about a pair of earrings. It was a crack, a small, cruel crack in the foundation of trust. Something inside her had started to shift, and though she didn't realize it yet, this was the beginning of a storm. After the missing earrings incident, everything changed for Zubaida. The warmth she once felt in the house began to disappear, little by little. It wasn't loud or obvious. It was quiet, slow, and painful. The kind of pain that doesn't shout, but lingers in silence. People started whispering behind her back. When she walked into a room, conversations stopped. When she left, they started again. Her sister-in-law, who used to laugh and chat with her, now gave her cold looks and rolled her eyes at the smallest thing. Even the house staff, once friendly and respectful, became distant. No one said anything to her face, but the air around her felt heavy with judgment. At family dinners, Zubaida noticed how the seats beside her always stayed empty. Her jokes no longer brought laughter. Her presence felt unwanted. She could hear the whispers sometimes, short, sharp words like thief, sly, or pretending. Every time she heard them, it felt like a knife in her chest. The saddest part? No one asked for her side of the story. They just believed what they wanted to believe. Her friends stopped coming over. Phone calls became fewer. Texts went unanswered. People she once laughed with now looked at her with doubt in their eyes. It was as if a dark cloud had settled over her name, and no one cared to clear it. Zubaida tried to stay strong. She kept teaching at the school, smiling at the children, pretending everything was okay. But the truth was she was breaking inside. Nights were the hardest. She would lie in bed next to Jabari, staring at the ceiling, wondering why he hadn't defended her. He acted like nothing had happened, like her pain didn't exist. She began to feel like a guest in her own home. No, not even a guest. A stranger. Someone who didn't belong. The house, once filled with laughter and warm welcomes, now felt like a cold prison. Every wall seemed to whisper rumors. Every hallway held a memory of better days. Zubaida didn't know what hurt more, the false accusations or the silence of the people who were supposed to love her. It happened on a Sunday evening, the day the whole family usually gathered for dinner. The table was full of food, voices, and noise. Zubaida had just placed a bowl of rice on the table when Mama Chipo's voice cut through the room like a blade. "Someone has stolen money from my drawer," she announced loudly, standing with her arms crossed. The room went quiet instantly. Everyone looked up. "This time," Mama Chipo continued, her eyes locked on Zubaida, "it's not just jewelry. It's money. A lot of it. Gone." Zubaida froze. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched the edge of the table. She didn't need to ask what was coming next. She could feel it. Mama Chipo didn't hint this time. She didn't beat around the bush. She pointed straight at Zubaida and said, "You're the only one who goes into my room. Don't pretend. Just return it." The silence in the room became unbearable. Zubaida looked around, searching for someone, anyone, to defend her. But once again, Jabari said nothing. He stared at his plate, not meeting her eyes. Her sister-in-law crossed her arms and gave her a smug look. Cousins, aunties, uncles. No one spoke up for her. Zubaida felt her heart drop. It wasn't just about the money. It was the shame, the public blame, the look in their eyes like she was already guilty. Her face burned. Her chest ached. Her legs felt weak, but she stood still, swallowing the pain. "I didn't take anything," she said, her voice calm but broken. "I would never steal." Mama Chipo scoffed. "Then where is it? Money doesn't walk away on its own." Zubaida couldn't take it anymore. She felt like screaming, like running away, like collapsing. But instead, something inside her changed, quietly, powerfully. It wasn't anger. It wasn't revenge. It was something deeper. A realization. No matter how much she tried to be kind, respectful, and silent, it would never be enough for them. They didn't want a daughter-in-law. They wanted a scapegoat. And they had chosen her. That night, Zubaida didn't cry. She didn't argue. She cleaned the dishes, said nothing, and went to bed with a storm quietly forming inside her. Something had snapped, not in rage, but in strength. Something inside her had finally woken up. Zubaida didn't sleep much after that night. Her body was tired, but her mind was wide awake. For the first time, she stopped blaming herself. She stopped waiting for Jabari to defend her or hoping the family would change. Something in her heart had turned cold, not with hate, but with clarity. If no one was going to stand up for her, she would stand up for herself. Quietly, smartly, without tears. She didn't pack her bags. She didn't scream or storm out. Instead, she started watching, listening, paying close attention. Mama Chipo always had a story, this missing item, that missing item. But suddenly, Zubaida noticed little things that didn't add up. One day Mama Chipo said she lost the earrings after dinner. A week later, she claimed it was in the morning. Small details kept changing. Slips in memory, maybe, or maybe something more. Then, something strange caught Zubaida's eye. One afternoon, while dusting the living room shelves, she noticed wires tucked behind the bookshelf. Not electrical wires. These were for cameras. CCTV wires. Her heart skipped. She followed them slowly and found that they were connected to a small box in the storage room, covered in dust. The cameras were installed but never used. Zubaida stood there for a long moment, staring at the silent system. A thought came to her. What if the truth was already here, just waiting to be seen? That evening, when no one was home, she searched online for tutorials. She stayed up late, learning how to connect the cameras. It wasn't easy. She had no technical background, but her will was stronger than her fear. Bit by bit, wire by wire, she brought the system back to life. For the next few days, Zubaida kept calm. She cooked, cleaned, smiled, but inside she was preparing for something. A silent war. Not with fists or angry words, but with proof. She didn't want revenge. She wanted truth. She wanted her voice back. And if no one was willing to hear her, she would make sure the truth spoke for itself. The cameras were now watching. And Zubaida was too. Zubaida had spent days making sure the CCTV system was working. She tested every camera, every angle. She didn't tell anyone, not even Jabari. This was her secret, her quiet way of protecting herself. For the first time in weeks, she felt a small sense of control. The house that once felt like a trap was now her battlefield, and she was ready. Exactly 1 week later, it happened. The family was in the living room when Mama Chipo suddenly let out a loud gasp. She clutched her wrist and looked around with wild eyes. "My gold bracelet is gone," she cried, her voice sharp and full of drama. "It was in my drawer this morning. Now it's missing." Zubaida stood still. Her heart didn't race this time. She didn't panic. She just watched. Mama Chipo turned to her, right on cue. "You were in my room again today, weren't you, Zubaida?" she asked, her voice heavy with accusation. "Why is it that things only disappear when you're around?" Some of the relatives gasped. Others shook their heads slowly. The same pattern again. But this time, Zubaida didn't defend herself. She didn't say a word. She just looked Mama Chipo in the eye and nodded slowly, almost calmly. "I think we should all watch something," Zubaida said quietly, surprising everyone. Without waiting for permission, she walked over to the small TV screen in the corner, the one no one ever used, and pressed play on the security footage. The room fell completely silent. There on the screen was Mama Chipo, clear as day, opening her drawer, taking out the bracelet, walking to the guest room, looking around to make sure no one was watching, then carefully tucking the bracelet under a pile of old bedsheets. Not a single word was spoken. Everyone's eyes were glued to the screen. Mama Chipo froze. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. Jabari looked like he had been slapped. The rest of the family stared in disbelief. Some turned their faces away, ashamed. Zubaida didn't smile. She didn't gloat. She just stood there, steady and quiet, her heart full. Not with revenge, but with relief. The truth was no longer hidden. The walls had seen it all. And now, so had everyone else. The next day, Zubaida didn't hide the truth. She didn't want whispers anymore. She wanted it out in the open, not for drama, but for healing. So, she calmly asked for a family meeting. She said she had something important to share. No one expected what was coming. They thought maybe she would apologize, or explain herself again. But Zubaida was done explaining. Everyone gathered in the living room. Mama Chipo, Jabari, the sister-in-law, uncles, aunties, cousins. Zubaida stood in front of them, her hands steady, her voice clear. "I've been blamed for things I didn't do," she began, "and I stayed quiet for too long. But now, I'd like you all to see the truth for yourselves." She picked up the remote and played the video. The silence was heavy as the footage rolled. Mama Chipo appeared on the screen, moving through the hallway, bracelet in hand. They watched her walk into the guest room and carefully hide it under a sheet. Not a single word needed to be said. The video spoke louder than anything Zubaida ever could. As the clip ended, the room was frozen. Mama Chipo's face went pale. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. She looked around helplessly, as if searching for a place to hide, but there was none. Jabari sat with his head down, unable to look at his wife. Shame was written all over his face. The same man who once stayed silent during the accusations now had nothing to say, not even a whisper. Zubaida didn't cry. She didn't raise her voice. She simply stood tall, her calmness louder than any anger. "I never stole anything," she said softly, "but you all chose to believe I did." Some of the relatives looked away in guilt. Others exchanged embarrassed glances. The sister-in-law fidgeted in her seat, her face flushed. The truth had been buried for so long, but now it stood in the middle of the room, undeniable. Mama Chipo had not only accused Zubaida falsely, she had made the entire family believe in that, and they had let it happen. That day, something deep shifted. Not just in the family, but in Zubaida. She had fought her battle quietly, wisely, and with dignity. And now the truth was free. Zubaida could have let it end there. The truth was out. The family finally knew what had really happened. But the pain she had carried for months, the shame, the whispers, the isolation, couldn't be wiped away with just one video. This wasn't just about a stolen bracelet. It was about her dignity, her name, and her right to be treated with respect. So, with a steady heart and the support of a few close friends, Zubaida filed a defamation case against Mama Chipo. It wasn't an easy decision. People warned her. "It's family," they said. "Just let it go." But Zubaida had let too much go already. This time, she wanted accountability. Not just for herself, but for every woman who's been blamed, doubted, or silenced in her own home. The court case took weeks. Zubaida sat quietly in every hearing, holding back emotions as lawyers presented evidence, including the CCTV footage. Mama Chipo tried to deny it at first, but the truth was impossible to escape. Her lies had been recorded, not just on camera, but in the silence and pain she had caused. Finally, the judge ruled in Zubaida's favor. The court declared that she had been falsely accused and humiliated in front of her family and community. Mama Chipo was ordered to pay a financial settlement for emotional damage, not millions, but enough to show that Zubaida's pain mattered. More importantly, Mama Chipo was ordered to make a public apology. She stood in front of neighbors, friends, and relatives and said the words that once seemed impossible. "I was wrong. I falsely accused Zubaida, and I ask for forgiveness." The moment was quiet, powerful, and unforgettable. The story spread quickly. Local newspapers picked it up. A few radio stations even spoke about it. "Teacher wins case against in-laws' false accusations," the headlines read. People in town started looking at Zubaida differently. Not with pity, but with admiration. For the first time in a long while, she walked with her head held high. Not because she wanted revenge, but because she had reclaimed her truth. And this time, the world was finally listening. After the court ruling, Zubaida could have gone back to her quiet life. She could have closed that painful chapter and moved on. But deep in her heart, she knew her story wasn't just her own. There were so many other women out there, women just like her, suffering in silence, blamed for things they didn't do, broken by words that left no bruises but deep, invisible wounds. So she decided to speak. It started with one small gathering at the local community center. She shared her story, not to shame anyone, but to show others that emotional abuse was real, and that silence wasn't the answer. Her voice was calm, but powerful. Women in the room cried quietly as they listened. Some nodded, recognizing their own stories in hers. Word spread fast. More invitations came: schools, churches, women's groups. Zubaida stood tall each time, telling the truth, not just about what happened to her, but about how emotional violence can destroy a person's spirit, and how important it is to fight back with truth, not hate. She didn't stop there. With the little money she received from the court settlement and help from a few friends, Zubaida started a small NGO called Saudiyatu, which means Our Voice. It offered legal advice, counseling, and a safe space for married women dealing with emotional or psychological abuse. Women came in quietly, many with shaking hands and teary eyes, but they left with something they hadn't felt in a long time: hope. Zubaida also began training young women in schools about self-worth, boundaries, and recognizing emotional manipulation. Her sessions were simple, but they left a mark. She reminded them that speaking up was not disrespect, it was self-respect. Her story, once whispered in shame, had become a source of strength for others. People now saw Zubaida not as a victim, but as a warrior, soft-spoken but unbreakable. She had turned her pain into purpose. Zubaida's rise wasn't about fame or revenge. It was about lighting a path for others still stuck in the dark. And every time a woman walked into her office, held her head up high, and said, "I need help," Zubaida knew this was just the beginning. 1 year later, the room was full. Women sat shoulder to shoulder, some holding notebooks, others just listening with wide eyes and open hearts. Zubaida stood at the front, speaking gently but firmly about healing, courage, and rising after. It was another one of her events, part of the movement she had built with so much love and strength. She didn't know Mama Chipo was in the back. Covered in a simple shawl, sitting quietly in the last row, Mama Chipo had come alone. No drama, no announcements. Just a woman who had watched her world change, a woman who had hurt someone and was finally facing it. When the event ended, Zubaida noticed her. Their eyes met, and for a moment the world stood still. The crowd began to leave, but Zubaida walked straight toward her. No anger, no fear, just calm. Mama Chipo slowly stood, looking smaller than she had ever seemed before. They didn't say much. Zubaida reached out, gently held Mama Chipo's hand, and said softly, "I forgive you, not because what you did was right, but because I refuse to carry the pain any longer." Mama Chipo's eyes welled with tears, but still she said nothing. Her silence this time wasn't cruel, it was full of regret. Zubaida turned back to the stage, looked out at the emptying hall, and said the words that had carried her through everything. The truth always finds its voice, even when buried under shame. And with that she smiled, not because the past was erased, but because she had finally come full circle, with dignity, peace, and power no one could take away again.